Hello, everybody, and welcome to your Ruby Live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction, and I'm also one of your instructors in the courses. And in particular, today is my office hours, so I want to give you a special welcome. And this is your chance to ask food and cooking related questions, and it's my opportunity to do my best to respond. And, as usual, as we start out today, I want to mention that you can participate more directly with a question or a comment by typing, that question or comment in the dialog box on the right-hand side, the sort of toward the upper corner of your screen, and that'll make its way to the queue. And if you would like me to respond to your question sooner than later, then you can click on the heart-shaped icon in the individual um, uh, question box that you see on the right-hand side of the page. So each of the questions that are already in the queue have a little heart-shaped icon, and that's just to bump it up in priority. But otherwise, I'll get to those today. All right. And it's a beautiful sunny day today. And with all that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. And the first one is from Misha, who says, hello. She says, hi. I guess I say hello. And the question is, after the course is over, will we still have access to the live sessions? Please tell us what else we will have access to after we complete the Forks Over Knives course. So with all of the courses, Forks Over Knives included, you definitely have access to the live events, to the live sessions, and you can access those at any time. And in terms of the course itself that you have graduated from, basically you have access to all of the content. You can't make any changes, such as submitting a new assignment or doing a quiz again, but you can view all of the content. And if you ever have any questions about that, feel free to reach out at support@rouxbe.com. Thank you. And the next question is from Diane, who says, what can substitute for full-fat coconut milk that would have the same creaminess and fat content? How about adding nut butter to soy milk to provide an equivalent amount of fat? Your thoughts? I think your suggestion is a great one. Any of the nut butters or seed butters can be thinned out, with soy milk or any other plant-based milk or even water. And they can be used in a number of different ways. And so give that a try. Each of these things, whether it's a tahini or some sort of a nut butter, they all have their individual flavors, of course. So please give it a try and see how you like those results in relation to the application in which you're using it. Thank you. Good idea. And let's see, the next one is also from Diane. And Diane says, is there an optimum size cut for vegetables used in making stock? It would seem smaller pieces would be able to draw out more of the flavor and nutrients from the vegetables. This is a good question. And the answer is going to depend upon the length of simmering time. And for any of the stock varieties that have a shorter simmering time, then smaller cuts are going to be the way to go. In other words, you want to increase the surface area to extract the flavor quickly. On the other hand, if you have long simmering times, such as multi-hour simmering times, then larger pieces are quite fine. You'll have plenty of time to pull out the flavor from all the mirepoix. And, I'll give you a couple of examples. You can make vegetable stock, in less than an hour simmering time. Fish stock, is even shorter, probably 20 minutes or so is going to be fine, 30 minutes or so. And, certainly in professional settings where you're making large volumes of stock. I was making, uh, a dozen gallons at least, every day of chicken stock and beef stock and vegetable stock. And in the case of the beef and chicken stock, those would simmer overnight. So they would get, somewhere between 8 and 12 hours of simmering time. And in those cases, I would put in like a half of an onion. Um, and it would be the volume was so large that there was a lot of prep. I mean, the mirepoix was, a half of a 50-pound bag of onions, and a third of a case of carrots and celery at a time. So it also helped, to streamline the prep time by just using large pieces, and sometimes just whole pieces of things could go in for such a long simmering time. But anyway, that's your answer. Short simmering time equals small pieces. Long simmering time equals large pieces. All right. And we have another question from Diane, and she asks, I want to purchase an air fryer, but I want to avoid nonstick coatings. Is there any brand that has stainless steel inserts, pans, and baskets without the nonstick coating, or at least is PFAS free? Diane, I don't have a quick answer for this question. I suggest that you do some searching online to see what the latest products and options look like. That world is ever changing, and within that selection out there, perhaps you'll find something that meets your specifications. Thank you. All right, and let's see. We've got a question from Leslie, who asks, what are some simple plant-based go-to weeknight dinners you make for yourself on repeat? I'll address a couple of categories of preparations or meals, and one would be Indian. I'll call them curries. That's kind of the catch-all term for these. Sort of saucy, right, preparations that can go with grains or breads. So I'll make some selection of that sort of preparation. So it could be a traditional dal, based upon some sort of a lentil, and sometimes I'll add some sort of a leafy green to add some variety to those. As you change the style of the variety of legume, that also changes up the dish, from night to night or week to week. Also, spice ratios can shift, and also through addition and omission of certain ingredients. So you can change the flavor profile on these preparations as well. And also as you pair them with different breads or grains, the experience of the meal will change too. So it could be brown rice or white rice or red rice or whole oats or whole wheat berries, quinoa, millet. Those are a few that come to mind. And on the bread side, sometimes it's leavened bread, that we'll bake at home. Also, flatbreads are pretty common in our home, whether it's a tortilla, or something more along the lines of a pita bread. Also, some Indian style flatbreads, like dosa, which is made from a batter, ideally fermented, based on rice and legumes. And though that can appear in many different styles or forms as well, in terms of additional additives, diced onions or tomatoes, cilantro. Sometimes even other grains can be added in a whole form too. to add some interest to those sorts of flatbread preparations. And then another scenario would be, we eat a lot of tacos. So I'm going to call them, Mexican-inspired meals. And we eat a lot of legumes here at home and always have, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 varieties in our inventory. And, some that I think we have in the house right now probably include chickpeas and black beans. And there's some Mayocoba, these kind of medium-sized white beans. There's pinto beans and black-eyed peas and brown lentils and mung beans, and some of the lentils are whole, some are split, some are peeled, some are peel on. So we always have a selection like that in the house, and we'll make, in addition, salsas. The fresh salsas are pretty common, right? Salsa fresca, your tomato, onion, cilantro, lime juice, salt, chili if you want it, sort of a quick preparation. I also have in the freezer salsa roja, which is made from dried chilies that are toasted, soaked, and blended, with some tomato and onion, a little garlic, cumin, and a splash of apple cider vinegar. Salt's going to be adjusted. And we always have some inventory of that. It's such a versatile salsa to use. And, that'll come out in addition to a salsa fresca. And of course, the salsa fresca can be made in different styles. Salsa roja can be made in different styles. There are many other salsas to choose from as well. And so if you think about all the legume varieties, and all those side options, then you can have some pretty fun meals. And, we usually make corn tortillas. They're very easy to make. And if you haven't made corn tortillas, I encourage you to give it a try and to keep practicing and to sort of refine that process if you enjoy tortillas, because they're quick to make and the aroma is intoxicating and the flavor is beautiful. And once you go fresh, you'll never go back to the grocery store variety. There's just no comparison. But those are a couple of sort of themes of how we might do dinner here, whether it's a weeknight or a weekday, or a weekend night, I guess would be the contrast here. And it provides a lot of variety. You can, again, bring in a lot of different vegetables that are included with these legume preparations, as well as side dishes in the form of cooked vegetables or salads to bolster that meal. On a cooler day, on a warmer day, to introduce a cooler dish at the table, I would consider a salad. Again, probably legume based. I just happened to make one yesterday that was some chopped broccoli, and there's some onion, tomato, cilantro, and some generous squeezing of lime juice with a bunch of chickpeas. And then that was bound with tahini and black pepper, salt, and you can adjust it with other spices if you want. And again, that can be, eaten on its own. It can be, eaten with some grains or breads, for lunch or for dinner. Those are all pretty easy. They're satisfying. They're flavorful. They're you can modify them to fit your mood or the ingredients that you have, in stock at that moment. So they're versatile and delicious as well. I hope you'll give some of these a try. Thank you. Next up is from Sue, who says, "Hi, hello, Sue. I have shredded vegetables left over. Can I ferment them the same way that I did with red cabbage and apple recipe from the fermentation unit? Rutabaga, carrots, beets, cabbage, and Gala apple." Yeah, the quick answer is yes, absolutely. And the sort of underlying concern to kind of keep in mind is just the cleanliness of everything. you always want fermentation to go in the direction you want it to go to, not in the direction of some other microbe might have in mind. So yeah, give it a try. There are, definitely uh, these pickled fermented preparations based on shredded vegetables, and curtido comes to mind. And this is I see commonly in Central American meals, and El Salvadoran meals come to mind. And so it's a thing, and people do it, and I encourage you to give it a try and see how you like the results. Thank you. And as a follow-up question, Sue asks, how long does brining solution last? So in terms of the solution itself, which would be basically water and salt, if that's what we're talking about, I mean, that would last indefinitely. And so long as it's kept clean, without any, outside things dropping into it, you're going to be fine to hold on to it for a very long time. As you get something, into a brine, you start that pickling process. Even then, that setup can last weeks and even months, and some would say years. It's very common to create a pot or a vat of whatever pickle you want to start to ferment, right, in your brine solution, and then just continue to add to it. You'll add vegetables to it, and you need to also top it off occasionally with some fresh brine. You want to maintain the salinity and the acidity, at a safe level to discourage microbial growth. And then also you want to bring the volume up to cover the products, inside your jar to discourage mold growth. Probably the worst thing that could go wrong would be mold growth. In other words, there's pretty little opportunity for other things to grow in an environment that's going to be high in acid and salt. And in the case of mold, and if you want to be super safe about it, you would discard the whole thing and just start over. But arguably, you could just clean off the mold that might be floating on top, and then pay closer attention to it. But the quick answer here is that brine solution can last for a very long time. You just need to be careful of the cleanliness, of fingers or utensils or other things that you might put into that environment. Thank you. All right, next up, we have a question from Melissa, who says, how did you get started in the industry? And what are some key things that help you in your path? Wow, okay, so this could be a long story, so I'll try to abbreviate it. For me, getting into the food world was a career change. And I'll start by saying that food has always been a big part of my life. I grew up with a Japanese mother in a very food-rich environment, and grew up in Japan as well, which itself is a very food-focused society. And so food was always near and dear to me, and I enjoyed learning to cook at my mother's side growing up. And I never really had an interest in working professionally, in the food industry, but there was a point when I had an opportunity to go to culinary school after working as a Japanese interpreter and translator for several years. And I went in with the intention to learn to cook for myself. It was just a deep curiosity I had about cooking. But by the time I came out at the other end of the program, I thought, wow, this, the high energy and the creativity and the structure and in other words, these contrasting sort of things that are part of the food service industry was very attractive to me. And so I ended up making a career change and kind of going down this path. And studying food in a structured, formal sort of capacity was very helpful. The online schools did not exist at that time, so it was an on-ground school here in Portland, Oregon. And as far as key things that helped me on my path, it was continued learning for sure. Um, for me, I went on to in order to kind of pivot into education eventually. I studied education. I already had my undergrad degree so I studied education at the graduate level, and also cultural anthropology with a focus on food, and which allowed me to do some food research in places like India and Mexico and Japan, which really fed my interest intellectually, but also allowed me then to share a lot of information around food and cooking with the people around me. And I studied Ayurveda along the way, and that allowed me to the opportunity to teach Ayurvedic cooking. And it also allowed me to do things that were not specifically hands-on food related, but things like lecturing on Japanese culture and history and tying it into food, and sort of satisfy these different aspects of my personality. So continual learning in different ways, I think, have been key, to developing this path that has unfolded in front of me, sometimes in unexpected sort of ways. And maybe I'll leave it at that. That's kind of in a nutshell, how I started, and some of the bigger stepping stones that have brought me to where I am today. Thank you. The next question is also from Melissa, and Melissa writes, what are various ways you've been able to use the combination of your culinary, whole food, plant-based knowledge and skills for profit? I outlined a lot of that in my previous response, to your earlier question, Melissa, and that is I've been in settings or created opportunities where I could turn around and teach these topic areas of interest to me. And so, having grown up in Japan and learned a little bit about Japanese cooking and food culture, I've been able to teach that in sort of specialized seminar settings for culinary students. And I had a keen interest in wine, and worked in a winery years ago, and around wine and food and wine pairing, and studied production of wine and global wine regions and this and that. And so there's a period of time when I taught kind of an intro to a wine class. And similarly for South Asian, or specifically Indian, food culture, I taught food anthropology at the university level. And so, and then on a less formal basis at the community level here, I've taught smaller cooking lessons or cooking classes on, like a one evening sort of a thing on plant-based foods, with a focus on whole food ingredients. And, some of that, for example, was with the Bob's Red Mill company, which is on the other side of town here, and other venues too. And so those are, some of the ways that I've been able to roll my interest into making some money, either as a mainstream or as a side gig. And so those are, maybe a few ideas for you. Thank you. Next up, from Maria, do you have a favorite whole food plant-based sandwich? I enjoy sandwiches for sure. And, well, we bake bread at home, different styles of bread. And what goes in between those couple of slices or rolled up in that flatbread varies a lot. And so I don't have a favorite. I mean, it's got to be, maybe my favorite is just very simply a delicious sandwich, right? But the filling, I mean, you name it, and I think we can probably construct something that tastes good, right? Between legumes and cooked vegetables and raw vegetables, maybe sliced thinly as a slaw, as a secondary component. We've got a lot of sauces to work with. I mentioned salsa roja earlier. I'm a big fan of tahini. I buy it by the gallon-sized jug down at the halal market here. And to make a quick tahini sauce, you thin it out with some water, generous squeezings of lemon juice, a little bit of salt, maybe other spices. Could be, whether something is as mundane as black pepper, or maybe in place of the lemon juice, it's sumac to bring in some of the sourness. And just whisk that together, and you've got a nice little drizzling sauce to go on a sandwich or anything else for that matter. Sometimes it could be a nice sautéed cauliflower steak, that kind of makes up that core meatiness of a sandwich. Sometimes they're legume-based patties. And again, they can be flavored in all different directions. I don't necessarily follow a recipe. I'll just grab the spice box, the masala dabba, and then start adding things to that mixture. And you can alter the texture based on the degree of cooking of your legumes or other internal ingredients. And you can have some fun with it. So that's my favorite sandwich. I hope that you'll give it a try, sort of freehand some of these things and think in terms of components rather than a single recipe, right? One thing that we outline in our courses is this framework approach to cooking, where, you've got bread, you've got the main internal component, call it a patty. And you've got a garnish, a slaw of some sort, and you have a sauce, maybe two or three of them. And all of those categories of foods can be altered in many, many ways. And so you can come up with dozens and dozens of variations, right, of the sandwich in this case. And so approach cooking in that manner, and you'll have a lot of variety to carry you forward. Thank you. And Anna Marie says, hi. Hello, Anna Marie. I tried to make pesto last week with no oil. It was dreadful. I was thinking about using avocado instead of olive oil. Do you have any suggestions? Well, yeah, a couple of things come to mind here in terms of just discussion and maybe troubleshooting here, or kind of maybe expansion of what pesto is and can be. Um, the oil base, helps sort of thin out that consistency and helps with that end texture, that smooth relative smoothness that we think about with pesto. So, maybe if you don't mind, consider using some oil to at least get that process started. And you can always use less of the pesto on what it is that you're eating if you want to, cut back on that oil, added oil in your diet. Also, I guess think about also what sort of equipment and tools you might use. I'm not sure, when you say dreadful, I'm not sure exactly what that refers to. I'm just trying to use my imagination here. But, as you start to break down some of these components like nuts or seeds, you can, do that in some sort of a grinder or a mortar and pestle. And as you start to incorporate some of these other ingredients, you're going to come up with a drier finished product. It could be a little bit crumbly or chunky, but certainly a little bit drier without the addition of volume provided by oil. So here's where we start to think about, a pesto-like preparation in a different sort of way. And part of this is going to depend upon how you intend to use it. If it's going to be a spread, on a piece of bread that is going to be part of the sandwich, then maybe you do want it to be more spread like, in which case some sort of a liquid, should be added. Um, you could kind of shift your focus to the avocado itself and start to think of guacamole as a base. And guacamole is often used as a spread for a sandwich as well as a dip, right, for crudité or for crackers. So think about the guacamole as a base and start to add things to that, whether it's the customary, onions or garlic. Some people add tomatoes and cilantro, but add beans to it, add cooked legumes to it, adds other spices to it to bring up different flavor profiles, and kind of play with it in that respect. You can add whole nuts or coarsely chopped nuts to add little bits of textural elements to it. And that can certainly be used as a spread or a dip or an accompaniment, to your meal. I hope that this gives you some places to start, further brainstorming, and that you'll find something that suits your palate within, your realm of creativity here. Thank you. And next up is Sylvia, who says, Hi, Sylvia. What would be a good substitute for mashed potatoes when used as a topping on a casserole like shepherd's pie? I've tried mashed cauliflower, but it's too watery for a low-carb dish. I am going to just throw out some suggestions for you. Okay, I don't have any solid results to lean on here, but try some other root vegetables like rutabaga, or a turnip comes to mind. But some of these things are going to have a relatively high water content, probably not unlike a cauliflower. One thing that you might try to do is, once you cook some of these things, okay, whether it's cauliflower again, or rutabaga, or maybe another root vegetable, is once you cook it, to try to dry it out a little bit. And the sequence of steps here, we might need to do some experimenting and try it one way and another, but try to dry it out a little bit in the oven at low temp, just to drive off some of the moisture, and then proceed from there. The other approach would be to mash it first, and then to dry it out a little bit, and then see how you like that texture, right, relative to the water content. Sweet potatoes come to mind as well, if that flavor profile works for you. There's many different degrees of sweetness among the variety of sweet potatoes out in the world. And, if you wanted a more savory sort of an approach, there are certainly potatoes that are going to be lower on the sweet profile. And for sure, some of these sweet potatoes, when they're cooked up, they have a drier consistency. Some are more dense, than a fluffy russet potato that you might mash, right, in a more typical preparation for a shepherd's pie. So you might want to prepare yourself for some different result, right, in terms of texture or mouthfeel with some of these other ingredients. But you might find something that comes out close with a little bit of experimentation. Give it a try. Thank you. And the last question for today is from Manish, who says, Hello, sir. I'm an aspiring chef who's trying to get a job. How can I leave a good impression in my job interview? And please let me know what kind of things are important to execute during a job interview. I think, in terms of a face-to-face job interview, it's going to be common in any industry. We like to to meet people um, that are nice people, that speak with a good vocabulary, and that have well developed thoughts around why they're at the interview. What is it that you want to achieve in the short term, medium term, and long term in your career development? And also an interview, remember, is not only a time for the employer to um, question you, but it's a time for you to question the employer. So to be informed about the business, about the cuisine, to the best of your ability, so that you can ask some intelligent questions that show that you're thinking, right, about what it is that you're getting into, and that you're a discerning potential employee. I think can be interesting for an employer. As an employer, I think most folks would want to surround themselves with people that are thinkers, yet are also willing to do whatever needs to be done, right, for the occasion. And when it comes to a food service job, there's just a lot of things that come up unexpectedly. You might be hired, as a cook of some sort, but dishwashing might be necessary from time to time just to help out. So to be open to those sorts of things, to be open to new learning, how to manage inventory, how to receive deliveries, these sorts of things are all going to be good for the interviewee. Um, and then many restaurant job interviews also have a practical component as well, where the restaurant manager or a chef will ask you to put in a half a shift or a shift in the kitchen to see how you communicate with others, how you are a team player, as well as looking at your individual skills and knowledge around food handling. So, it's a good idea to practice and practice some more on knife skills. I think that's number one, as well as your knowledge around cooking methods and flavor development and balance of seasoning. So, how to use salt, how to use acidic ingredients, like vinegar or lime juice to balance a particular dish. These sort of things are basic and also very important to daily cooking. And so a manager or a chef may want to see your aptitude around these sorts of basic foundational building blocks as they consider you as a possible member of their team. So also keep in mind, soft skills. Soft skills are those things like interpersonal communication and critical thinking, the way that we speak to each other and listen to each other. Are all examples of some of the soft skills. And regardless of the industry, every employer wants an employee that has soft skills developed to some extent or another. And whatever the industry is, soft skills are important. Even if you're in the kitchen and you're just prepping food, you still need to interact with people. And that's where soft skills come in. It's all about communication. A lot of it is oral communication, but also written communication. Can you compose an email, right, that is properly punctuated and makes sense and clearly conveys the idea or the message that you intend to convey? Many times we need to interact not just with our colleagues, but eventually with our business associates when we place an order, when we receive an order, when we need to repair equipment, and then eventually with customers. And that's when soft skills become critical. There's nothing like creating difficult relationships through the inability to communicate clearly, timely, and politely. And so those are a few things that come to mind when I think about the idea of job interviews and new job opportunities. So I hope some of this will help you, Manish, and all the best to you. And thank you very much, everybody. This brings to conclusion today's program. I want to thank you for joining me today and for participating in today's live session and in my office hours. And I look forward to seeing you again next time. Until then, happy cooking.